What if a queen, a powerful woman at the heart of medieval Europe, simply disappeared? What if the historical record, so diligent in detailing battles and coronations, suddenly went silent on her fate? From the shadowy halls of 9th century courts to the sun-drenched kingdoms of the 12th century, these are the stories of 5 royal figures who stepped out of the limelight and into the mists of mystery. Number 5. The Queen, who lost her crown and her story. Bertha of Lorraine. Her name might not immediately spring to mind when thinking of medieval royalty, yet her life, from its privileged beginnings to its mysterious end, was woven into the complex tapestry of European power. Born around 863, Bertha was the daughter of King Lothair, the second of Lotharingia, and his favored mistress Waldrada. This parentage, however, was immediately a source of both advantage and struggle. Her father, Lothair II, was locked in a bitter and long-standing dispute with the Church, and his powerful uncles, including Charles the Bald of West Francia and Louis the German of East Francia, over the validity of his marriage to Theobald and his desire to marry Waldrada. He wanted to legitimize Bertha and her siblings, a desire that sparked a continent-wide scandal that even drew in the Pope. The very legitimacy of Bertha's birth was questioned, debated, and ultimately denied by the highest spiritual authority of the age. Yet, despite this cloud hanging over her early years, Bertha still possessed royal blood, a lineage that ensured she would not simply fade into obscurity. The world Bertha inhabited was one of constant flux, where kingdoms were carved up and recarved between the descendants of Charlemagne, the Carolingian dynasty. Lotharingia, her father's kingdom, was a coveted land, situated strategically between the emerging powers of what would become France and Germany. This constant feudal tension meant that marriages, even for a child like Bertha, whose legitimacy was precarious, were crucial tools in the diplomatic chess game played by kings and emperors. The fate of princesses, legitimate or otherwise, was rarely their own. Bertha's story takes a clearer turn when around the year 885 she was married to Theobald, the first Count of Arles. This was a union of significant strategic importance. Theobald was a powerful figure in Provence, a region then loosely connected to the Carolingian world, but often asserting its own independence. His family, the Bossonids, were immensely influential in Burgundy and Provence. This marriage for Bertha offered a pathway to genuine aristocratic standing and influence, moving her away from the shadow of her father's marital scandals. The couple settled in their domains, and it appears they had several children, including Hugh of Arles, who would later become King of Italy and a significant power player in his own right, and Boso, another notable figure. For a period, Bertha's life seems to have followed a more conventional path for a high-ranking noblewoman of her time, managing her household, raising her children, and navigating the social currents of her husband's court. However, the relative stability of Bertha's life as Countess of Arles was shattered with the death of her husband, Theobald I, sometime around 895. In the medieval world, the death of a powerful lord often plunged his family into uncertainty, particularly if their children were young. Widowed Bertha was once again a pawn in the intricate power struggles of the Carolingian successor. Her personal safety, her children's inheritance, and her political future were all at risk. It was a time when women of wealth and influence often sought new protectors or made strategic alliances to safeguard their positions. Bertha did exactly that. Sometime after Theobald's death, she entered into a second marriage, this time to Adalbert II of Tuscany, a powerful margrave whose territories in central Italy bordered the Papal States and were crucial to controlling access to Rome. This was a formidable alliance, elevating Bertha once more to a position of considerable influence and power. Adalbert was known for his ambitious policies and his involvement in the tumultuous politics of Italy, a land then plagued by rivalries between competing aristocratic factions. Bertha, as his wife, would have been at the heart of this volatile political landscape, overseeing a vast household and wielding indirect yet significant power through her husband's position. Her son, from her first marriage, Hugh of Arles, grew to be an ambitious and capable leader. He played a significant role in Italian politics, eventually becoming King of Italy in 926. Bertha, therefore, had a direct connection to royal power through her son, even if she herself was not a queen in the same way. She witnessed her children ascend to high positions, a testament to her own strategic choices and the strength of her lineage. But it is at this point precisely when her life might have been expected to become clearer in the historical record that Bertha of Lorraine begins to fade. Her husband, Adalbert II, died around 915. Her children continued their prominent roles, particularly Hugh of Arles, who, as King of Italy, would have been expected to maintain contact with and perhaps support his mother. Yet after Adalbert's death, the historical mentions of Bertha become sparse, then non-existent. Historians and chroniclers of the period who diligently recorded the lives of kings, counts, and their wives seem to lose track of Bertha. The exact year of her death is not known. Her place of burial is not known. She simply disappears from the written records that meticulously detailed the lives of her powerful sons and the intricate politics of the Italian and Frankish courts. Did she retire to a convent, as many widowed noble women of means did, seeking spiritual solace and a quiet end to their days? Did she live out her remaining years in one of her sons' palaces, an honored but increasingly private elder figure? Or did she simply pass away her death, unrecorded by the scribes, who focused on the more immediate succession battles and political maneuvering that followed her husband's demise? The lack of information is striking. For a woman who was the daughter of a king, twice married to powerful counts, and the mother of a future king, her ultimate fate is shrouded in historical silence. No chronicle laments her passing, no dost will. The most reliable sources, such as the Annofuldenses or the works of contemporary Italian chroniclers, like Liutprand of Cremona, focus on the male figures of power and their struggles, and Bertha, after her political utility as a wife ceased, appears to have vanished from their notice. Her disappearance from the records leaves many questions unanswered. Was it an intentional withdrawal from public life? Was she simply overshadowed by her powerful sons? Or was it merely that the chroniclers of the time often focused on immediate political succession and male lineage, simply did not deem the passing of a widowed elderly noblewoman important enough to record for posterity? The fact remains, Bertha of Lorraine, who began life under a cloud of controversy and rose to influence through strategic marriages, ultimately stepped off the historical stage without a trace, leaving behind only the legacy of her powerful offspring and the enduring mystery of her final years. The specific date of her death, a fundamental detail for even lesser nobles, remains elusive, a testament to the abrupt silence that enveloped her story. Number 4. The Empress who faded into silence. Maria Laskarina. Her story is one of a princess who ascended to the highest imperial rank, endured tumultuous times, and then, after the death of her powerful husband, seemingly faded into the mist of history. Born around 1200, Maria was the eldest daughter of Theodore I Lascaris, the founder and first emperor of Nicaea, and his first wife, Anna Angelina. To understand Maria's life, one must first grasp the extraordinary circumstances of her birth and her father's rise to power. The Byzantine Empire, the continuation of the Roman Empire in the East, had suffered a catastrophic blow in 1204. The Fourth Crusade, instead of liberating Jerusalem, had sacked Constantinople, the glorious capital, and established the Latin Empire. This event shattered the Byzantine world. Amidst this chaos, Theodore Lascaris, a brilliant and determined leader, established a Greek successor state in Nicaea, in Anatolia. He gathered the remnants of the Byzantine aristocracy and clergy, aiming to reclaim Constantinople and restore the true Roman Empire. Nicaea became a beacon of Byzantine identity and a center of cultural and political resistance against the Latin invaders. Maria grew up in this environment of constant struggle and fervent hope, knowing that her family's very existence was intertwined with the survival and revival of the Byzantine legacy. As the eldest daughter of an emperor, Maria was a highly valuable asset in the complex world of medieval diplomacy. Imperial princesses were often used to forge crucial alliances, and Maria was no exception. Her marriage, celebrated in 1218, was to King Bertha I of Hungary. This was a monumental union. Hungary, a powerful kingdom in Central Europe, was a significant player on the continent, and an alliance with Nicaea offered strategic advantages to both sides. For Theodore Lascaris, it meant a powerful ally against potential enemies in the Balkans, and a degree of legitimacy on the wider European stage. For Bela, it brought a connection to the venerable imperial lineage of Byzantium. Even if in exile and potential influence in the East, Maria journeyed from Nicaea to Hungary, a long and arduous journey across different cultures and landscapes. She arrived in a sophisticated European court, adapting to new customs and a new language. As Queen of Hungary, Maria would have played a vital role in courtly life, managing the royal household, engaging in charitable works, and potentially influencing her husband's policies. She bore Bertha IV 10 children, a large family that included future kings and queens, ensuring the succession and establishing dynastic ties across Europe. Her daughters, including Saint Margaret of Hungary and Kunigunda of Poland, became influential figures in their own right, spreading Maria's lineage throughout the continent. Maria's time as queen was not without its challenges. Hungary faced the constant threat of incursions from various nomadic groups, and her husband, King Bertha IV, was heavily involved in political maneuvering within his kingdom and with neighboring powers. However, the greatest challenge to Hungary and indeed to much of Europe came in 1241 with the Mongol invasion, the Golden Horde. A terrifying and seemingly unstoppable force swept across Eastern Europe, devastating Hungary. King Bertha IV and Maria were forced to flee, seeking refuge in the Dalmatian coast. The kingdom was ravaged and countless lives were lost. This was a period of immense suffering and dislocation for Maria and her family, testing their resilience to its limits. After the Mongol retreat, Bertha IV undertook the monumental task of rebuilding his shattered kingdom. Maria, as queen, would have been instrumental in this process, supporting her husband, fostering recovery, and maintaining morale. The rebuilding effort was remarkable, and Hungary slowly regained its strength. Maria's role as queen mother and the matriarch of a growing family was undeniably significant during these years. She was a witness to and participant in one of the most dramatic periods in Hungarian history. Then in 1270, after more than 50 years of marriage, her husband, King Bertha IV, died. For a queen in the medieval period, the death of her husband often marked a profound shift in her status and influence. Some dowager queens maintained considerable power, especially if their sons were young, or if they had strong political factions supporting them. Others retired to convents or lived out their days quietly. For Maria Laskarina, the historical record becomes remarkably silent after her husband's death. Her son, Stephen V, ascended to the throne, and her life as queen mother should have been recorded. However, there are no known chronicles that detail her activities, her residences, or her final years after 1270. There is no mention of her death, no record of her burial place. It is as if, once her role as queen consort ended, and her son was securely on the throne, the chroniclers simply stopped taking note of her existence. Unlike many other queens and empresses of her stature, whose deaths and burials are meticulously documented in the annals of the time, Maria Laskarina simply fades away. Scholars today have no definitive answer to what happened to her. Did she retire to a quiet life, choosing to live out her remaining years in seclusion, perhaps in one of the royal estates or a religious house? Was her death simply not deemed important enough to record by the scribes who were focused on the reign of the new king, Stephen V, and the ongoing political developments? The most extensive Hungarian chronicles, such as the Chronicon Pictum, mention her marriage and her children, but then abruptly become silent. Regarding her final years, the specific date of her passing is unknown, making her fate one of the enduring mysteries of medieval Hungarian and Byzantine history. For an empress and queen whose life began amidst imperial ambitions and saw her through a devastating Mongol invasion, her ultimate disappearance from the historical narrative is a perplexing and intriguing historical silence. Number 3. The Queen who became a historical ghost. Matilda of France, her story is one of royal lineage, a brief and tumultuous marriage, and a subsequent disappearance from the historical stage so complete that even her death date is unknown. Born around 943, Matilda was the daughter of King Louis IV of France and his formidable wife Gerberga of Saxony. This parentage placed her at the very heart of the Carolingian dynasty, even as its power was waning in West Francia. Her father, Louis IV, known as de Outremer, because he had spent his youth in exile in England, struggled to assert his authority over the powerful regional magnates of his kingdom. Her mother, Gerberga, was a woman of immense strength and political acumen, sister to the powerful emperor, Otto I of Germany. This meant Matilda had connections to both the French and German royal houses, a powerful advantage in the complex web of European politics. Growing up in the French court, Matilda would have been privy to the constant struggles for power, the shifting alliances, and the intricate rituals of medieval royalty. As a royal princess, her destiny, like that of many noble daughters, was tied to strategic marriage. Her hand was a valuable prize, capable of forging crucial alliances and consolidating power. Around 965, Matilda was married to King Lothair of France, her own brother. While this might seem shocking by modern standards, it was not entirely unprecedented in the medieval period, particularly within royal and imperial families, though it was certainly less common than other marriages. This union was likely intended to strengthen the ruling Carolingian line and keep power within the family. Lothair, Matilda's brother, ascended to the throne of West Francia in 954, and their marriage aimed to consolidate his position and ensure dynastic continuity. However, this royal marriage, intended to stabilize the kingdom, was remarkably short-lived and, according to historical accounts, ended in disgrace and annulment. The reasons for the annulment are not entirely clear, but they are often attributed to the couple being too closely related by blood, making the marriage illegitimate in the eyes of the Church. Another theory suggests political expediency, perhaps to allow Lothair to seek a more advantageous union elsewhere. Whatever the precise reasons, the annulment of a royal marriage was a significant event, often carrying with it a degree of scandal and public humiliation for the woman involved. For Matilda, it meant being stripped of her queenly title and returned to her family's care. Her future uncertain. After the annulment, Matilda disappears from the prominent historical records of the French court. Unlike many other annulled queens who might have entered a convent, remarried, or continued to be mentioned in charters and chronicles, Matilda's fate becomes an almost complete blank. The Anno Svedestini, a key chronicle for this period, mentions her marriage and its annulment, but then effectively ceases to record her existence. Contemporary sources, like Richer of Rheims, whose Historiae provides detailed accounts of the Carolingian kings, also fall silent of her death is not known. Her place of burial is not known. She simply ceases to appear in the historical narrative after her brief moment as queen. It is as if she became a historical ghost, vanishing from the records of her family and the court she once inhabited. For a daughter of a king and sister to another, this silence is particularly striking. Her mother, Gerberga, a powerful and well-documented figure, lived many years after Matilda's annulment. Yet even her extensive records do not shed light on her daughters. Ultimate Tashard. She might have died shortly after the annulment. perhaps from illness or the emotional toll of her situation. If so, her death was deemed unworthy of record or simply lost to time. Another possibility is that she retired to a religious house, choosing a life of quiet devotion away from the glare of court politics. Many noble women in the medieval period, especially those who were widowed or whose marriages were annulled, found solace and purpose in monastic life. However, if she did enter a convent, no record of her profession or death in such a place has survived. It is also possible that she lived out her days in quiet obscurity on one of her family's estates, supported by her powerful relatives, but no longer playing any active public role. In an age where chronicles often focused on wars, successions, and the lives of male rulers, the life of a discarded queen, no longer politically relevant, might simply have been. The silence of the historical record is the most compelling and frustrating aspect of Matilda's story. She was born into one of the most prominent dynasties in Europe, briefly held the title of queen, and then, after a personal and political upheaval, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the tantalizing question of what truly became of the daughter of Louis IV, Matilda of France. Her life after 965 remains an enigma, a historical ghost haunting the pages of the past. Number 2. The Empress who disappeared from the palace. Richelieu of Provence, her life began in obscurity. A humble noblewoman who rose to become queen and empress of the Frankish realm, only to vanish into the shadows after her husband's death. Born around 845, Richelieu was the daughter of Bevin of Gorza, a count in the region of Provence, and a powerful figure in his own right. Her family, the Bosonids, was a rising force in the Carolingian world, and her brother Boso would later become King of Provence. This lineage, while not initially royal, was influential and deeply entrenched in the political landscape of the fragmented Carolingian Empire. Richelieu's early life would have been spent amidst the intricacies of provincial, noble life, far from the grand imperial courts. Her destiny changed dramatically in 870, when she became the second wife of Charles the Bald, King of West Francia, and from 875, Holy Roman Emperor. Charles the Bald was one of the grandsons of Charlemagne, a formidable and ambitious ruler who sought to restore the grandeur of the Carolingian Empire under his own rule. His first wife, Ermentrude of Orléans, had died in 869, leaving him in need of a new consort, and ideally a male heir. Richelieu's marriage to Charles was a politically astute move. It consolidated Charles's influence in Burgundy and Provence, regions where Richelieu's powerful family held sway. It also allowed him to counterbalance the influence of other aristocratic factions within his kingdom. As Charles the Bald's wife, Richelieu quickly rose to the pinnacle of power. She was crowned Queen of West Francia in 870, and even more significantly, Empress of the Holy Roman Empire in 875, when Charles was crowned Emperor in Rome. This made her the most powerful woman in Western Europe, a position that came with immense prestige and responsibility. She would have presided over a lavish court, managed a vast household, and been involved in charitable works, patronizing churches and monasteries. Chroniclers of the period, such as Hincmar of Reims, a prominent archbishop and advisor to Charles the Bald, mention Richelieu regularly, detailing her presence at court and her growing influence. Richelieu was not just a figurehead. She was actively involved in politics. During Charles the Bald's frequent military campaigns, Richelieu often acted as regent, governing the kingdom in his absence. This was a testament to her intelligence, capability, and the trust her husband placed in her. She issued royal decrees, managed state affairs, and even played a role in military matters. In 877, for instance, when Charles was preparing for a campaign in Italy, Richelieu was left in charge of the kingdom and tasked with defending it against Viking raids and potential internal rebellion. This was a position of immense responsibility and danger, and she demonstrated considerable resolve. However, Richild's powerful position made her many enemies among the Frankish nobility, who resented her influence and her family's rising prominence. She was sometimes accused of nepotism, favoring her family members, particularly her brother Boso, with grants of land and positions of power. These accusations, common against powerful queen consorts, highlight her perceived strength and active role in court politics. Her time at the zenith of power was relatively short-lived. In 877, Charles the Bald died during a journey over the Alps. His death plunged the Carolingian Empire into renewed succession, crises, and internal strife. Richilde, as the widowed empress, found herself in a precarious position. She had given Charles 2 children, but only one, Rotilde, survived to adulthood, meaning she had not provided a direct male heir for Charles's successor, Louis the Stammerer, who was Charles' son from his first marriage. Following Charles's death, Richilde's power rapidly eroded. Louis the Stammerer, her stepson, became king of West Francia, and her influence at court diminished. She continued to try and assert herself, sometimes in alliance with her powerful brother, Boso. When Louis the Stammerer died just 2 years later, in 879, the kingdom was again thrown into turmoil with 2 of his sons, Louis III and Carloman II, vying for the throne. Richilde attempted to intervene in the succession, possibly trying to secure a stronger position for herself or her family. The Annales Vertiniani, a contemporary chronicle, describes her attempts to influence the election of the new king. Her brother Boso seized the opportunity presented by the chaos to declare himself King of Provence in 879, effectively breaking away from the Carolingian realm. This act further complicated Richilde's position. While it solidified her family's power base, it also made her a target for those who sought to restore Carolingian unity. Richilde's last significant appearance in the historical record comes around 884, when she was accused of conspiring against the new king, Carloman II. She was effectively sidelined and stripped of much of her remaining political influence and wealth, and then, just like that Richilde of Provence, disappears from the historical narrative. The precise date of her death is unknown, though some sources suggest it was around 910 or 914 decades after her last known public actions. Her burial place is not recorded. Chroniclers who meticulously documented her rise to power, her regencies, and her political maneuvering become utterly silent about her final decades. It is as if she simply stepped off the historical stage, fading into complete obscurity. What happened to the formidable empress who once ruled a kingdom? Did she retreat to a monastic life, seeking solace in a convent, away from the political intrigue that had defined her earlier years? Did she live out her days in quiet retirement on one of her estates, perhaps in Provence, supported by her family, but no longer a player in the grand game of thrones? The lack of information is astonishing for someone who held such a prominent position. The Annales Fuldenses, another key source, does not mention her after the late 880s. Her fate remains a profound mystery, a stark reminder of how even the most powerful women in the medieval world could, when their political utility expired, simply vanish from the written record, leaving behind only tantalizing questions about their final years. Number 1. The Queen who sailed away from history. Maria of Antioch. Her life was a dramatic tapestry, woven from the volatile threads of the Crusader states, Byzantine imperial ambition, and the relentless political intrigue of the medieval East. Born around 1145 in Antioch, one of the most significant Crusader principalities, Maria was the daughter of Constance, the reigning princess of Antioch, and Raymond of Poitiers. Her lineage was a fascinating blend of Western Frankish nobility and subtle Eastern connections. To her mother, who was also related to the Byzantine imperial family, Antioch itself was a melting pot of cultures, a vibrant, wealthy city-state on the Mediterranean coast, constantly navigating alliances and conflicts with its Muslim neighbors and the powerful Byzantine Empire. Maria grew up in this unique environment, steeped in both Western chivalric traditions and the more sophisticated, often ruthless politics of the Levant. Her destiny, like that of many medieval princesses, was to be a pawn in the grand chess game of international diplomacy. In 1167, Maria was chosen to become the wife of Amalric I, the King of Jerusalem. This was a marriage of immense political significance. Amalric, a widower, was seeking a new queen, and a union with the ruling house of Antioch offered strategic advantages, cementing an alliance between two of the most important Crusader states. The wedding was a grand affair, likely held in Tyre or Jerusalem, drawing together the most prominent figures of the Latin East. Maria entered a court that was arguably the most powerful and significant in the Latin Middle East, becoming Queen of Jerusalem. As Queen Maria immersed herself in the life of the royal court, she bore Amalric a daughter, Isabella, in 1172, who would later play a crucial role in the succession struggles of the kingdom. Maria's stepchildren included the young Baldwin, the future leper king, and Sibylla. Court of Jerusalem was a hotbed of political maneuvering, constantly balancing the needs of defense against puissant rulers like Saladin, with the internal rivalries among the Frankish nobility and various religious orders. Chroniclers of the period, such as William of Tyre, whose monumental Historia Rerum in Partibus Trans Marinis Gestarum is our most detailed source for the Crusader states, frequently mention Maria, detailing her arrival, her marriage, and her growing role within the kingdom. Maria was more than just a queen consort. She was a woman of ambition and political astuteness. After the death of her husband, King Amalric I, in 1174, her young stepson, Baldwin IV, inherited the throne. However, Baldwin suffered from leprosy, and his fragile health meant that regents would be necessary for much of his reign. Maria initially vied for the regency, but it was granted to Raymond III of Tripoli. Despite this setback, Maria remained a prominent figure at court, often aligning herself with the powerful Ibelin family, a highly influential and established Frankish noble house in the east. This alliance would define much of her subsequent political life. The court of Jerusalem was deeply divided between two main factions: the court party, often associated with the Ibelins, and Maria, which favored a policy of thefticated for Francus. In defolidem bulicid, nature re de forte, catenin mad. Core Maria, as a powerful dowager queen and mother of Isabella, was a key player in these factional struggles, using her influence to support her chosen allies. As Baldwin IV's health deteriorated, the question of succession became paramount. Maria's stepdaughter, Sibylla, was the primary heir. Maria vehemently opposed the rising influence of Guy of Lusignan, a newcomer from Poitou, who had married Sibylla. Maria viewed Guy as a dangerous and unsuitable choice for the throne, believing he would undermine the stability of the kingdom. She even attempted to prevent Sibylla's marriage, and later to secure the annulment of her own daughter Isabella's marriage to Humphrey IV of Touraine, possibly intending to marry Isabella to a more powerful or politically acceptable figure, such as Conrad of Montferrat. These attempts highlight Maria's active and determined involvement in the highest echelons of power. However, despite her efforts, Maria's influence waned. Baldwin IV, influenced by his mother Agnes of Courtenay and the rising star of Guy of Lusignan, eventually named Guy as his heir and regent. When Baldwin IV finally succumbed to his illness in 1185, and his young nephew, Baldwin V, Sibylla's son, died shortly thereafter, in 1186, Sibylla claimed the throne, and her husband, Guy, became king. Maria's party, the Ibelins, were largely sidelined, their political power greatly diminished. It is at this critical juncture that Maria of Antioch effectively disappears from the historical narrative of the Crusader states. With her political allies out of power and her own influence eradicated by the new regime, she seems to have made a decisive choice. According to some historical accounts, Maria of Antioch returned to Constantinople, the majestic capital of the Byzantine Empire. This move made sense, given her family's connections to the Byzantine imperial house. Her mother, Constance, had ties to the Komnenos dynasty. It was a retreat from the tumultuous and increasingly desperate politics of Jerusalem, where the Latin kingdom was facing imminent collapse at the hands of Saladin. However, once she arrived in Constantinople, the historical record regarding Maria of Antioch becomes remarkably, frustratingly silent. There is no known record of her death date. There is no mention of her burial place. She simply vanishes from the chronicles that had meticulously detailed her life as a princess, queen, and political operative in the Crusader states. The extensive Byzantine chronicles, which often kept detailed records of imperial figures, and those connected to them, also contain no definitive accounts of Maria's later life or death in Constantinople. Did she live out her days in quiet retirement, perhaps supported by her Byzantine relatives? Did she enter a convent seeking spiritual solace, away from the political turmoil that had defined her public life? Or did she simply pass away her death, unrecorded, because she was no longer a figure of direct political consequence to the Byzantine court, which had its own internal struggles? The silence of primary sources like William of Tyre's history, after she loses political prominence, is striking. No chronicler, Eastern or Western, deemed it necessary to record the ultimate fate of this remarkable queen. Maria of Antioch, a woman who rose from a powerful principality to the queenship of Jerusalem, who navigated the treacherous waters of court intrigue and witnessed the relentless advance of Saladin, ultimately sailed away from the historical record. Her final years, her last breath, and her resting place remain one of the many unsolved mysteries of the medieval world, leaving us to wonder what truly became of the queen, who simply vanished from history